The stars shimmered with quiet arrogance, hanging over the galactic core like distant gods. Every inhabited system was watching. Broadcast carried the message in all known tongues, punctuated by the same unmistakable image, the towering figure of the galactic king seated upon his obsidian throne, surrounded by light and subjugation. His voice rolled out not like thunder, but like a verdict. Final. Cold. Absolute. Humans, he said, pausing just enough to savor the disdain on his tongue. Fear war. Gasps rippled across several systems. Some laughed. Others shifted nervously, especially the races who had once resisted and been swiftly silenced. They shroud themselves in treaties, cower behind diplomacy. Their alliances are not strength, but desperation. His eyes narrowed, glowing faintly beneath his ridged brow. They have forgotten that survival is earned, not negotiated. At the Terran Lunar Command Post, General Helena Rourke stood perfectly still, watching the live transmission. Her crisp white uniform bore no decorations beyond her rank, an intentional choice. Her presence didn't need to be loud. It simply needed to exist. Around her, junior officers stirred, muttering curses or half-formed responses, but Helena remained statuesque, lips pressed thin, eyes unblinking. The broadcast ended. A hush fell over the room like a hammer. "General Rourke," said Admiral Kovacs, breaking the silence without ceremony. "Your thoughts?" She blinked once. "Give me a ship." Kovacs stared at her, half hoping he'd misheard. "Helena, this isn't. No bureaucracy," she said, still watching the screen, now filled with static. "No delay. I'll speak for Earth. We can't send a military leader into a political tribunal. That," she replied, finally turning to face him, "is why we keep losing ground. You send diplomats to deal with tyrants. I've seen what that earns." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You really believe it's worth the risk?" She nodded once, slow and deliberate. He challenged our courage. "If we don't answer that directly, with everything we are, then maybe he's right." He studied her face, the scar along her jaw, the age in her eyes that far exceeded her years, the tension in her stance like a coil waiting to snap. "Very well," he said. "But God help us if you fail." "I don't fail," she said, already turning for the launch bay. "I endure." The diplomatic cruiser Resolute Dawn detached from the lunar dock 12 hours later, bound for Nox Vera, the central hub of galactic diplomacy. The journey would take 6 days through hyperstream tunnels. Helena spent those days alone in the observation deck, surrounded by screens, old war footage, and silence. She reviewed every recorded engagement the Galactic King had initiated in the past 20 cycles. His tactics were brutal, uncreative, and devastating. He did not outthink his enemies. He simply crushed them before they could organize. Helena noted his patterns with clinical disinterest. She had seen his type before, conquerors drunk on momentum, terrified of stagnation. At night she read from ancient Earth texts. Not manuals. Not tactical doctrine. Poetry. Philosophy. Reminders of what they were really fighting to preserve. On the final night before arrival, she stared out into the void. Her voice was quiet, meant only for herself. "He thinks we're afraid of war," she said. "But he's never seen what we do when we stop running from it." Nox Vera appeared like a polished wound in space, beautiful, complex, and scarred by centuries of negotiation, betrayal, and bloodless conquest. Its tribunal chamber, carved into the core of a planetary moon, resembled an arena more than a council hall. Delegates from over 200 species gathered in circular rows, eyes gleaming with curiosity, cynicism, or boredom. When Helena entered, the murmurs began. A human. Alone. No entourage. No ceremonial guards. Just a woman in white, walking straight-backed and unflinching toward the center of the chamber. Then the king arrived. Varkor strode in wearing ceremonial armor, each plate etched with the history of species he had broken. His skin shimmered like carved cobalt under the chamber lights, and his presence pulled silence from the air. He smiled when he saw her. It was not a friendly smile. "You come alone, human," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber like a weapon. "Do you bring Earth's surrender?" Helena met his eyes. "I bring its memory." He laughed, tilting his head. "Do explain." She took one step forward, planting herself at the center of the room. "Earth remembers what it cost to survive. We remember the skies torn by our own weapons, the oceans choked by the blood of our arrogance. We remember every war, every retreat, every inch gained and lost. We remember that peace is not weakness, it is discipline. But make no mistake, King, if you force us to forget that discipline, if you demand we show you what fear truly looks like." She paused, letting the words settle. "You will see how terrifying we can be." The silence that followed was different than before. Heavier. Varkor's smile twitched. "Then let us see this terrifying spirit of yours. I propose a war simulation. Tactical, strategic. My forces against yours. Should you win, Earth retains its council seat. If not, you return home as my subject." Helena didn't blink. "Agreed. You accept quickly. You don't wish to consider the consequences? You've already given me all the reason I need." Delegates stirred. Several whispered in languages Helena couldn't understand but whose tones were universal. Surprise. Uncertainty. Respect. Varkor turned, robes swaying like banners. "Then prepare yourself. We begin at dawn." That night, Helena received a private message from an ambassador of the Corellian Alliance, a race once independent, now annexed. The ambassador's face appeared in hologram, translucent and cautious. "General Rourke," she said, "you are either extraordinarily brave or impossibly naive." "Maybe both," Helena replied. "I wish I could offer support, but any visible alliance with humans puts my people at risk." "I understand," Helena said. "Then watch closely. You may not have to stay quiet for long." She shut the transmission and turned to her console. The war simulation protocols were already loading. System maps. Logistics. Fleet types. Resource routes. This was not a mere game, it was a full strategic campaign, using real parameters and adaptive AI based on each leader's recorded behavior. It would be war, shaped by thought, not fire. She activated a holographic map of Sol, the human system, and traced a line outward to its closest border with Varkor's territory. Her finger paused over a simulated choke point, narrow, defensible, overlooked. "That's where he'll strike first," she murmured. She knew this not because she was brilliant, but because men like him always did the same thing: brute force, quick reward, visible power. It was a performance, not a strategy. She would make him perform until he danced himself into a trap. In the hours before dawn, she wrote a brief message to Earth Command. It contained no status update, no request for support. Just 12 words. "They mistake our silence for fear. Let them. Until we speak." The tribunal chamber was filled with a different kind of energy the next morning. Not all. Not expectation. Something colder. Everyone knew what this day represented. The simulation began with a pulse of light, systems illuminating, galaxies blooming into existence across the chamber's vast star map. The war simulation was more than just symbolic, it was spectacle engineered to humiliate. Every breath within the tribunal chamber felt charged, not with awe, but with a hunger for drama. Species that had long bowed beneath the iron shadow of the Galactic King now sat forward in their seats, hoping to witness the supposed frailty of Earth exposed. Even those who'd quietly admired humanity's diplomatic discipline couldn't resist the lure of a public unraveling. In this arena, fear wasn't a consequence, it was currency. The star map bloomed to life, a living galaxy of artificial stars and orbital lines stretching across the chamber's domed ceiling. Spectators looked upward as if watching gods carve out destiny. General Helena Rourke didn't look up. She studied the control interface projected before her, calm, analytical, merciless in its simplicity. To her left, a small command AI, a cube of flickering quantum light, chattered telemetry in a whisper that only she could hear. It didn't advise. It didn't predict. It merely provided data. Everything else came from her. Across the chamber, King Varkor leaned forward, plated fingers wrapped around the edges of his throne-like command chair. He had chosen a show of force for his simulation avatar: 5 assault fleets, 17 dreadnoughts, and a defensive ring so dense it would take a full cycle to breach. His units surged across the star map like wildfire, pushing into contested systems, snapping up territory like a butcher carving flesh. Helena responded with silence. Her fleets dispersed, jumped, vanished into the edges of unclaimed space. It looked like retreat. To the inexperienced, it reeked of fear. "Is this the pride Earth carries into our council?" Varkor taunted, his voice magnified for all to hear. "Smoke and shadow?" Helena responded without turning her head. "Smoke means fire is coming." In her sectors, she began a pattern that had no symmetry, no obvious purpose. She allowed resource depots to be taken, then rerouted fuel lines to convert abandoned outposts into decoys. Her forces moved like whispers, appearing just long enough to be chased, then slipping away again. In response, the king chased with growing frustration, sending bulkier ships into deeper systems far from resupply. It was a lesson in patience. A lesson Varkor had never learned. By the third simulation day, his fleets were stretched across 7 sectors. Most commanders would have consolidated. He expanded. He was determined to finish what he saw as an insult, to crush not Earth's forces, but Helena herself. This was personal. And it made him predictable. She sprung her first trap in Sector 19A, a feint that collapsed into a pocket ambush. His ships were pulled into a dead region with no escape routes, where sensor jamming and drone interference created total confusion. His flagship, simulated though it was, suffered a full systems breach. Over 40% of his fleet icons flickered into red. Gasps echoed in the gallery. For the first time, silence held weight against him. "You resort to dishonor," he growled. Helena's voice was steel wrapped in frost. "You declared war. I just gave it what it asked for." Still, the simulation continued. Varkor reorganized, creating a 3-pronged push toward what he believed was Earth's central command node. Helena let him come. She let him win, temporarily. A key system fell. Earth's AI defenses collapsed. His forces celebrated across 1,000 display panels. But Helena had already moved. Every unit he'd assigned to that sector was now surrounded. Her reinforcement fleets, drawn from hidden trade routes and decommissioned jump points, converged in perfect sync. He watched the star map shift against him, his triumph folded inside a cage of his own making. The king slammed his fist onto the armrest. "You play with illusions." Helena stood. "I play with what you underestimate," she said, raising her voice not in anger, but in deliberate clarity. "You mistake silence for surrender. You mistake strategy for fear. You mistake humanity's restraint for weakness. And that is the only mistake you'll remember." The simulation system paused. Final score tallies began to scroll. Territorial gain, Earth. Fleet survivability, Earth. Command efficiency, Earth. Morale disruption, Earth. Projected outcome of extended war, Earth victory. A full 10 seconds passed before the room absorbed it. The king sat motionless, fists trembling against the arms of his chair. Around him, the council's delegates murmured, shifted, recorded, whispered in languages old and new. The illusion of his dominance was broken, not shattered by overwhelming force, but cut apart by clarity and patience. The adjudicator rose. "The simulation is concluded. Earth retains its position on the Galactic Council." There was no applause. Just the sound of assumptions dissolving. Helena didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She turned and walked from the center of the chamber, eyes forward, spine straight, every footstep echoing with defiance. Later, the king requested a private meeting. They stood in a neutral chamber beneath the tribunal's gravity fields, surrounded by nothing but stone and silence. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "No," she corrected. You underestimated my species. His eyes narrowed. You're dangerous. We are, she said. But only when you give us reason. You think this changes anything? It already has, she said. Not because of power. Because of doubt. Your empire doesn't fear us yet. But now they've begun to wonder. And fear always begins with wondering. He looked at her then, not with fury, but something else. Something colder. Calculation. Understanding. Recognition. You didn't win because you were stronger. She nodded. We never are. Not at the beginning. He stepped forward. She didn't flinch. I will not forget this, he said. I'm counting on that. That night, Helena stood alone aboard the Resolute Dawn, watching Nox Verus shrink behind her as Earth's stars came into view once more. She didn't feel triumph. Not truly. War never ended with victory, it ended with pause. The brief breathe between storms. The moment when your enemy recalculated and your allies waited for your weakness. She was not relieved. But she was ready. A soft chime rang through her quarters. A message. From the Corellian ambassador. You gave us something today. Not hope. Not yet. But a mirror. And in it, we saw that silence is not always submission. Thank you. Helena closed the message. She returned her gaze to the stars. The war hadn't been real. But the warning had been. And next time, it would not be fought with maps and numbers. Next time, they would see Earth not through a screen, but through fire. She hoped they would choose peace. But if they didn't, if they chose to test humanity's rage again, then let them remember who they provoked. And let them regret ever calling Earth afraid.